Mimer from Tafshin Lamed Gimel, Shabbos Parshas Mitzvah Yud Beis Nisan Tafshin Lamed Gimel, and this Mimer in this week's Dvar Malchus is a hemshech, a continuation of the Mimer that we learned at the beginning of last week. In last week's Dvar Malchus, that was titled Ki Yisholcha Bincha. That was from Yud Aleph Nisan, and over there the Rebbe spoke about in Ki Yisholcha Bincha about the Ben Chacham is asking his questions because he knows what the Torah mitzvah is. He is a Ben Chacham. He knows Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, as the Rebbe will review. His question is, why mitzvahs begashmis? Why don't we do the mitzvahs like the Avos did? And for that, the answer is Avodim Hayinu Lefarim Mitzrayim. As he will sum up a little bit of that, and he will elaborate further. Avodim Hayinu Lefarim Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Parim Mitzrayim. That's the response to what it says, that when your son will ask you tomorrow, say, what are different mitzvahs? That Hashem, your God, commanded you, that we know that Shehi Sheilas Ben Chach. We know that the Haggadah divides. There's 4 different types of questions, depending if it's a Ben Chacham, Ben Rasha, etc. And by the type of question, it determines what the type of child that's asking, what the type of person that's doing the asking, as the Friedrich Rebbe's word is, Chacham Mahu Omer. The Chacham, whoever he is or what he is, he expresses in what he's saying. Tom Mahu Omer. So when you look at the Tom's question, he asks us Mazois, you already know what type of person is asking that question. The same thing, the Ben Chacham. How do you know that it's talking about a Ben Chacham? So you look at the type of question that he asks. It says in line 5, like it's obvious from the fact. Part of this Proteam Mitzvahs Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, he details the specific types of mitzvahs. There are ceremonial mitzvahs, there are super rational mitzvahs, there are civil laws. It doesn't say in general what is this service. So therefore, from that type of question, you can already determine who and what type of questioner you're dealing with. Spoiler alert, explained previously, what's the content of this question? What is the Eidos Chukim Mishpatim that Hashem commanded you? Since the intention is that it should be that he commanded. And what's the idea of command? From the word togetherness. The purpose of a mitzvah is not just that Hashem is telling us to do something and we're doing it, but it's about joining us together. So if it's about joining us together, shouldn't we look at a different means to join us together other than the mitzvahs? Why? What's wrong with the mitzvahs? It says in line 11, this should be the connection that we have with Hashem, should be in through a means that's beyond individual desires. Very interesting expression that the Rebbe uses over here. In the other mimer, and he will get to this also over here, the emphasis was more on the physicality of the mitzvahs, dealing with the lowness of the world, immersing oneself in the world and doing the mitzvahs, toiling with the world, etc. So it would seem that if you want to connect with Hashem, you need to have something more spiritual. Here the Rebbe raises it further. If you're going to deal with the infinite, you're going to deal with the Baal Haratzon, dealing with the Baal Haratzon is something that you need to transcend specific things. So as soon as you start talking about specific things, Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, and you're starting to categorize them and put them into different boxes, you're in a way limiting them. And you are removing their infinite nature and the transcendent nature that we're trying to tap into, because Hashem transcends all of the details. So as soon as we start talking about Ritzonis Pratim, we're losing that. Rather, like you said in the previous mimer, you can speak about this mimer, how should we connect with the Balarotz? Through Mesiras Nefesh, giving ourselves totally away to Hashem, not in individual, specific, detailed type of matters. Then the Rebbe goes on further, line 13. How does this bonding with Hashem, with the Balarotz and the Master of the Will, come about through the individual levels of the Eides, Chukim, Mishpatim, all these specifics and details? In addition to the question, the way we just now formulated it, that the question is, how is it possible to affect a togetherness and a joining with the Master of the Will through the Eides, Chukim, Mishpat? Even if we will be able to answer the question why it had to be specifically through the details of Eides, Chukim, Mishpatim, still the difficulty remains. It had to be, but what is the means to do so? Why, or what is there in the Eides, Chukim, Mishpatim that enabled this joint? So first, we have the question, why? They say, why? This is a question that we might have answered. But even once we have the why, the question is, and now how? How can individual mitzvahs, details, like small things, tap into the Balarotz and the Master of the Will? So in addition to that question, line 19, after the brackets, or not in addition to it, but as an extension of this, how it could be, is because Eidos Moirish Adam Nimtza B'Maim, the Matzah Shetzarech LaEidos. This is, we had this in the previous mimer, that when we talk about mitzvahs, there are testimonial mitzvahs. This indicates that the person is in such a state that he needs something to attest to Hashem. What does that mean? Haynu Shalakusu B'Helam V'Hesteres. Godliness is something that's concealed by, something that's covered over. On something that's revealed and open, testimony doesn't apply. Testimony only applies by something that others are not aware of. The Gemara says even something that will become revealed eventually, the Torah did not demand and need that there should be witnesses, top of page Vav. So therefore, going back to the mitzvahs that are called Eidos, since a person needs to have fulfillment of mitzvahs in such a way that witnesses are necessary, testimony is necessary, that shows that godliness is in a state of concealment. It's something that's covered over. So if it's something that's covered over, that means that it's very far from Hashem. How can something that is dealing with a level that's very far from Hashem be a connection with Hashem? Which is the point of the question over here in the how. Not just the why, but the how. Same thing is going to talk about Hukim and Mishpatim. All of these things are going to indicate a distance, and therefore, how can those things that indicate the distance be the means for connection? Line 3, the Hayno being Hukim Sotu, it's concerning Hukim Moshein Chakika from the word engraving. Shuai Stablos get specifically through putting in effort and toil. Because to engrave, you need to work hard. It's much harder, like we said, to engrave something than to write something, and definitely much harder than speaking something. So what does that mean in our fulfillment of mitzvahs? This means the person's in such a stage. A person needs to toil to affect within himself the idea of fulfilling mitzvahs. V'cheinu being the mishpatim, so too is concerning mishpat, doing naseichel, the level of intellect. The afshas though seichel the kedusha, though it's intellect of kedusha, in other words, it's holy intellect. Mikol makom still know you do it's known. The level of intellect is much more difficult to affect the idea of self-sacrifice. In other words, again, intellect shows again the distance. Because if I need to have completely giving up my life for Hashem or other aspects of self-sacrifice, intellect acts as a blocking. That shows, again, at this, you do how much like it's known the example of this and the metaphor of a head and a foot. It's much easier to affect Mesiras Nefesh in the foot than the head. To jump into hot water, you could put your foot into hot water a lot easier than putting your head into hot water. Why? Because the head, his brain wants to understand and doesn't want to do something that it feels it's against its benefit, but the foot just follows orders. So this is all an expression of the distance between the person and Hashem. So how can that distance be the cause of their joining? When a person finds himself in a lowered state, until he's completely immersed in the physical desires and matters of this world. In other words, he is not in a level of mishpatim. He's not in a level of intellectually conscious and aware of Hashem. For him, it's easier to come to self-sacrifice than someone that's immersed in holy and spiritual things. He doesn't have anything to exchange it with. In other words, there is nothing, it's either holiness or the opposite. There's nothing else. So therefore, when he comes with a challenge, so he's got to choose holiness, even if it means the ultimate sacrifice. As opposed with the level of intellect of Kedusha, it's the first garment. In other words, the intellect is enclosed in thought, and thought is the first of the three garments of the godly soul. He has what to exchange it with. In other words, he says, okay, I won't do Mesiras Nefesh, but I have all these lofty things and these great spiritual thoughts that I can immerse myself in instead. Why give up my life when I have my awesome brain of learning Torah and so on and so forth and connecting with Hashem? Therefore, it's much more difficult for a person that is serving Hashem in the level of mishpatim with seichel of kedusha to come to Mesiras Nefesh. Remember, but Moshe Shinyon is seichel to kedusha, as it's known the explanation concerning what it says concerning Moshe, that Moshe was about the seichel of kedusha, and that's why, as opposed to the others, he wanted to understand the end of Parsha Shmois. Lama hariyos lama zeh. Why did you do it bad? Moshe was like it says, minamayim shesiu. Minamayim shesiu means it came out of the level of water, the level of chachma. Because the level of chachma, he wanted to understand the chachma of kedusha. What does it mean? Why is there all the suffering? So, and despite that, or not despite that, but because he was the seichel of kedusha, it says each Moshe under Moed Mechalot Mashapne Adama that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble person before every person that's on the face of the earth. Why was he so humble? Because he saw the great self-sacrifice of the generation of the heels of Mashiach. Why is that? In other words, he knew or he felt that because of his seichel of kedusha, he could perhaps not reach the Mesiras Nefesh of the generations before Mashiach comes, because, like we said before, Seichel de Kedusha has an alternative. I won't have Mesiras Nefesh, but I still have my Seichel of Kedusha. Whereas the generations of the heels of Mashiach, it's either self-sacrifice or down in the dumps. So therefore, they chose Mesiras Nefesh. Concerning this, it says in Tehillim that so, just like in the times of the Gola, so too in the holy time, we should see you this way. So it says that this is the pasuk says, that my soul thirsts to you in a state when there was no water, when there was no godly revelation. So we should see you in holiness. What is the connection? So Chassidus explains, Halavai b'kodesh chazisicha. Halavai, I would have the same yearning and the same desire to see you when I'm in a state of holiness as when I'm in a state of lack. Because in a state of lack, there's either total negative or Mesiras Nefesh. Whereas when I'm in a state of holiness, like we said, Mishpatim, Seichel of Kedusha, so you could say, you know what, I don't have to go overboard. I don't have to go Mesiras Nefesh. I have my Seichel of Kedusha. Even top of page Zion, Shabbadargis, Moish, Shuin Achach, over Seichel of Kedusha, since the level of Moish, which is the level of Chach, and Seichel of Kedusha, Kasha Yoisa Lifel, in Mesiras Nefesh, it's much more difficult to create and affect the idea of self-sacrifice. All this indicates the low level that's in the testimony and the chukim mitzvahs and the mishpatim mitzvahs. In Cain, once we've just now explained how this chukim mishpatim are very low. If they're very low, how? Before we asked why, and now we're adding the how. How is it possible? So something so low, how can it affect the togetherness and the joining? Ask him that we say tziva from the word joining, that Hashem makes the joining with us. This comes the response that we were servants. That since Evan is also from the word worked hides, that we generate they rework it to be able to make it into something useful of the parchment and so on, which is Bar Leil Baruch, like explained previously at length. So this reworking, this idea of the Yidden and being in Galus Mitzrayim had caused the Yidden to be so refined and changed that even the physicality of the world, even a world where it's Eidus Chukim Mishpatim showing the distance of Hashem in the world, should still be able to be permeated with God. That was the point that we spoke about in the previous mind. So up till here is mainly a summary of what we learned earlier. Now he's going to continue and add to the previous question. Any questions? Okay, line 9, page Zay. So after the whole explanation of the previous Maimer, the Rebbe is now going to ask, how do we reconcile the Chassidus meaning of Avodim Hayinu, that's about refining the hides, refining the world, purifying ourselves, so to be able to be the joining together of the most highest level with the most physical, with the literal meaning of talking about that we are serving and we are slaves to Parah. It's just the opposite. We are connected to Klippah. How do you feel? The meaning of worked hides, which are oiros, that the oiros, the hides belong to the Jewish person that's working them and transforming them and elevating them. As opposed to what it says that we were servants and slaves to Parim Mitzrayim, The simple meaning of this is the Bnei Yisrael Hoyabad Metzal Pari Melch Mitzrayim, that the Jewish people were servants by Pari, the king of Mitzrayim. Jayim Moshel the Kippam, he ruled the entire dome of the world. He was a superpower. He ruled the entire world. Like Moshel Gamal Bnei Yisrael, he also ruled the Bnei Yisrael. Ad Shuvai Vidu Mitzrayim is Bnei Yisrael before till that the Mitzrayim made the Jewish people serve with difficult labor. How could we say about this the idea of servants in a positive sense, in a way of transformed hides, when the simple meaning of the pasuk is that we are enslaved to Paroi, that he was the worst, instead of transformative, that he takes an object that's coarse and transforms it and eventually makes it into a parchment that you use for Sefer Torah, for example. The Rebbe answers in line 20, who the idea behind this is Hine Pari, who oisis Pari is from the letters of the word the neck. Shu Inyan Oid of the Arach Ampin is the idea of the neck of Arach Ampin. And its root is from the world of Tayu that precedes Tikkun. It's not only prefacing in time, Elagam Kedima B'Mayla. When we say that Olam HaToyu is preceding the world of Tikkun, it's a level preceding. It's a level in quality it precedes, not in a level of time. Even though it's such Ein Zara, obviously there's no physical time. But it means qualitatively, because spiritually time can mean that A has to come before B. But we don't know what the A coming for B is. But here we're talking about spiritually, qualitatively, Tayu is higher. In what way are they higher? To keep him that lights of the world of Tayu are strong. They are great, very powerful. And therefore, because they are so great and so powerful. The iris of Tayu fell below in the breaking and through the breaking of the vessels. They fell very low. Mitzrayim, to the land of Mitzrayim, from the expression constraints and boundaries. In other words, the higher something is, in other words, the lights of Tayu being so powerful, the lower it falls, the further it falls. Also, just like in the sense of a physical light. The stronger the light is, the further it reaches. But in this case, in the case of just the stronger the light is, it dissipates, it gets less and less further from it. But here, it's because it's so high, when it falls to the lowest place. Therefore, the Oidus of Tayu, where did it fall? It fell to the lowest most place, Eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, it's known what's written in the Arizal's Sefer called L'Kutei Torah, as opposed to the Rebbe's L'Kutei Torah. Pasuk, and what it says in the Pasuk, Lo ya'al lechem levadi yichya adam, not on bread alone does a person live. Yal kol moitzi piyavai yichya adam, rather on everything that comes out of Hashem's mouth. That's what the person lives. What does that mean? Shaloi al lechem levadoi. Not on the bread alone. It's not atzmas alechem yichya. It's not the bread itself that sustains and gives life to the person. Rather, in the simple sense of the pasuk, because Hashem said so. But the Arizal says the moitzi piyavaya shebetoich shemalubish ma'alechem. In the bread, there is the moitzi piyavaya. In this piece of bread that I'm eating, there's what's coming out of Hashem's mouth. What's in this bread? How does this bread grow? Because there is the statement, there's the utterance of the Asara Amoris that the Abishah said, let the earth give forth greenery, which includes all vegetation and so on. So that Maimer of Hashem is in the bread that I'm eating, and that's what it means. Not the bread, the physical bread, but the moitzi piyavaya in that bread. The mimer of the Asara Mars that's responsible for the bread to grow, that's what I'm sustaining. That's what Arizal says. But the question is, it's not just the bread that has a Moitzi Piavaya in it, the human being also has. So we'll have in line 8, you need to understand that also in a person, there's also enclosed within him, just like in the bread, there's also one of the Asara Mamaras enclosed in him of the statement that says, let us make Adam. If so, why does he need to receive life specifically from the bread? That's included in it. That's included the mimer of let the earth give forth a covering of grass. What's more special about that than the mimer that a person has because he's living in existence? Answer for this is brought down to this line 11. With the idea behind this is the beginner's diamonds the inanimate world and the vegetation and the animal world, which are all the different things that act as a person's sustenance, drinks water, he eats bread, he eats meat, etc. Their root is from the world of Tayu that preceded and is therefore higher than the world of Tikkun, like we said before, and more powerful. But they came down that chain descent in multiple levels by the Shviras Akelim through the breaking of the vessels, until they descended very much below. And physical things came into being from them, the meat that I eat, the bread that I eat, and the water that I drink. Adam Sharchem El Matikun, on the other hand, the person comes from the world of Tikkun. Therefore, even Jewish people, that in the level of Medaber, which is higher than Doimen Sameachai, in human beings, they are the choices amongst the human beings. Still in all, even the highest level of Medaber needs the Doimen Sameachai Mekablim Chayusam Mimoitzi Piavai. They receive their life force and vitality from what comes out of Hashem's mouth. The Asara Amoris that's in the bread. Like it says, not on bread alone will the person live. What's the Adam referring to? Atam Kriyim Adam, like Chazal say, you are called Adam, Ve'nachim Kriyim Adam, and the Goyim are not called Adam. Why? Why does he need that? Because the Asara Amoris that's in the state of in the living animals, but more so the Moitzi Piavaya in vegetation. It's much higher than that which came out of the mouth of Hashem. That's Asara Amoris of Nasa Adam B'Talmeinu K'Museinu. Yoiser Mezeh u'Moitzi Piavaya B'Shabbat. And even more so, you find that even the higher than the Chai, the Moitzi Piavai of the Chai, even higher than the Moitzi Piavai and Samech and the growing things, is the Moitzi Piavai that's in the earth. The Lachain, because the Moitzi Piavai in the earth is the most high, has the most highest source, way higher than everything, even than the Samech and the Chai. And where does it express itself in? Shalachain, Hakoil, Hoyim, and Ha'af. The Chazal said, everything comes out of the earth. It says even the Nefesh Chaya, Nefesh Chaya. The earth gives forth living animals. Everything comes out of the earth. Why? Because the earth is the repository of the highest energy from the world of Tayyip. The like I mentioned yesterday, the higher something is, falls lower. Zel Indian, like the example of the stone that's on the top of a wall, and when the wall falls, the highest stone on the wall, the highest brick on the wall, will fall the furthest from the wall. So going to express itself also in what came down, just like in Doimon Sameach Chaim Medaber. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how this power of Tayu manifested and came down specifically and in a very powerful way in Mitzrayim, as we will continue tomorrow.